3 women invited me upstairs. None of us knew that night would change the way we saw each other forever. I didn't expect the night to end the way it did. We started downstairs in a kind off-cozy apartment that always felt like a crossroads for neighbors and friends. Warm lighting. Half-finished bottles of wine on the counter. Soft music floating under the conversation. I wasn't planning on staying long, but time slipped without me noticing. Julia was the first one I noticed when I walked in earlier. Not because she was loud or trying to stand out. Quite the opposite. She carried herself with thicken of grace that made people naturally make space for her. Her hair fell neatly over her shoulders, and when she lawed, it wasn't sharp or forced. It was low, controlled, almost private, like she gave you a piece of it only if she wanted to. I'd caught her watching a few times across the room. Her gaze steady, not shy, but not careless either. Claire was different. She had a spark in her eyes. The type of energy that made her the center of Astery before you even knew what Thestery was. She gestured a lot when she acted, her hands brushing the air as if she were painting her words. At one point, she leaned over to pour me drink, her hand brushing mine with Agnes that suggested she enjoyed testing boundaries just enough to see how Simeon reacted. And then there was Emma. She spoke less than the other two, but she didn't need to fill the air. Tobe noticed. She leaned against the kitchen counter most of the evening, sipping slowly, her head tilted as though she were studying everything, taking it in before deciding what she thought. Her eyes lingered longer than her words did. When our gazes crossed, she didn't look away quickly. She just let it stay quiet, unhurried, until it almost became too much. The gathering had thinned out. The music was softer now, the room quieter. I was standing near the door, debating whether it was time to leave when Julia's voice cut gently through Thier. "You should come upstairs with us," she said, tilting her head toward the stairwell. Her tone was casual, but here eyes held mine for a breath longer than casual required. "We've got a better bottle waiting up there, and the view is worth it." Claire laughed lightly and chimed in. "And better chairs too. These ones are terrible." She stood beside Julia, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, her smile playful, but her gaze steady as if measuring whether I'd hesitate. Emma stayed where she was for a moment, then pushed herself gently off the counter. She didn't say much, just gave the faintest of nods in agreement, her lips curving into a small smile that was the most secret. The 3 of them stood together then, not demanding, not even insisting, just waiting. There was nourish in their posture, no nervous energy. They were offering something, and they seemed to know that whether I took it or not, the choice itself was already a moment. My pulse picked up, though I kept my expression calm. The thought of stepping upstairs with them, all 3 of them, felt heavy and electric at the same time. It wasn't about the wine. It wasn't about the view. It was about being invited into something I couldn't yet name, but could already feel. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding and nodded. "All right," I said softly. Julia's smile deepened, subtle but certain. Claire reached past me to flick off the light, her hand grazing my arm just enough to leave warmth behind, and Emma, walking just behind us, whispered, "You won't regret it." And just like that, I was following them upstairs. The stairwell creaked under our steps, the sound sharp in the hush of the late hour. My heart beat faster than its hold have for something as simple as climbing stairs. But there was a shift in the air, a sense that the night had just taken on a new shape. When Julie opened the door to their loft, I felt it immediately. The space was nothing like the downstairs apartment where the evening began. It was wider, airier, a single-pin room where the city lights spilled in through tall windows. Lamps glowed softly from different corners, throwing warm amber patches across the wood floor. The faint scent of sandalwood mingled with something floral. Maybe Emma's perfume. Maybe a candle burning somewhere unseen. "Come on," Julia said, slipping her sweater from her shoulders and draping it neatly over a chair. Her voice was quieter up here, as though the space itself invited softer tones. She moved with that semi-natural poise, unhurried, graceful in a way that made the simplest gesture feel deliberate. Claire brushed past me close, enough that hem of her sleeve brushed against my hand. She grinned as she reached for a bottle sitting on the counter. "Better wine, just like I promised," she said, her tone playful. She poured into glasses with a flourish, handing the first one to me. Our fingers touched when I took it, her skin warm against mine for a moment longer than it needed to be. I caught Emma leaning against the far wall, half in shadow. She wasn't fighting, just watching, her eyes following every movement, every shift in the room. When my gaze met hers, she tilted her head slightly, her lips parting as if she might say something, then deciding against it. Instead, she simply gave me a small, knowing smile before looking away. That tiny, wordless exchange left me more unsettled than any clever remark could have. I moved further inside, glass in hand. Julia gestured toward the sofa, a large piece draped in soft blankets. I sat, the fabric cool beneath my palm, and Julia settled into the armchair opposite. She crossed one leg over the other and leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on her knees. Her attention fixed on me with quiet steadiness. Claire slid in beside me, close enough that her knee brushed mine. She made it look casual, but I felt the intentionality in it, the choice to bridge the distance. She talked easily, asking what I thought of the place, what I noticed first. I answered, but my awareness wasn't just on her words. It was on Julia, her gaze lingering, her silence speaking volumes. It was on Emma, standing still near the wall, studying the scene as if she could see layers beneath it that even I couldn't name yet. The loft hummed with more fanlight and voices. It was the kind of atmosphere where every sound seemed to carry weight, the clink of glass on wood, the faint rustle of fabric when Simeon shifted. I felt surrounded, not wrapped, but drawn in, as though each of them had their own quiet pull, weaving further into whatever this night was becoming. The loft seemed to breathe differently once we all settled. The music downstairs had faded into memory, leaving only the low hum of the city outside and the occasional clink off glass. The room was spacious, but the way they gathered around me made it feel smaller, more concentrated, like the four of us were suspended in a bubble of warm light and soft edges. Claire was the first to fill the silence, her voice carrying that effortless spark she seemed to live in. She leaned in closely as she spoke, her words painting some story about a disastrous attempt to cook for a neighbor last week. The tale was funny, but I barely caught the details. What I noticed more was the way her knee pressed lightly into mine under the blanket. She had pulled over both our legs. She didn't shift away. Instead, her weight rested there, an anchor of warmth that felt strangely steadying across from us. Julia sat in the armchair, her posture elegant, hands wrapped around her glass. She wasn't talking much, but her eyes never wandered far from me. Whenever Claire Shan swept close in her animate head straddling, I saw Julia's gaze flicker toward the movement, watching not online but the space between us. She had a way of studying without judgment, of being present without intruding, and it made me aware of myself in a way I rarely was. Emma, meanwhile, had drifted closer from the wall. She chose a spot at the edge of the sofa, angled slightly toward me, her quietness unchanged, but her presence undeniable. She asked a question here and there, simple, direct things. What do you like most about this city? Her voice was soft, deliberate, carrying weight without being heavy. When I answered, she didn't feel the silence after. She just watched, her eyes steady on mine, like she was measuring truth in the spaces between my words. The three of them, different as they were, seemed to create a rhythm. Claire's laughter was quick and light, spilling into the air like sparks. Julia's silence was grounding, her steady gaze pulling me deeper into myself. Emma's quiet questions landed like soft stones dropped into water, rippling outward, making me think about what lingered beneath the surface. I felt pulled in three directions at once, yet not in conflict. Each one seemed to see me differently. Claire teasing out the playful side of me, Julia drawing out something steadier, Emma uncovering parts one hadn't expected to share. And all the while, small touches stitched those layers together. Claire's nesting against mine, Julia's eyes never leaving me for long. Emma's hand brushing lightly against my sleeve as shifted closer, none of it loud, none of it demanding, just a quiet weaving, a subtle invitation I couldn't name but couldn't ignore. The loft wasn't just a room anymore. It had become a stage where every glance, every laugh, every lingering touch carried meaning. And though I didn't know where it was heading, I knew one thing for certain. He wasn't the only one who felt the shift. At some point, the air in the room changed. I don't know if it was the second glass of wine or the way the city outside had gone quieter, or maybe just way silence started to feel heavier between words. But Julia rose from her chair with a grace that seemed rehearsed, though I knew it wasn't. She set her glass on the table, smoothed her blouse at the hip, and turned to me. "Come see the view," she said softly, gesturing toward the balcony doors. Her voice wasn't commanding, but it carried a certainty that pulled me up before I even thought to resist. I followed her, glass still in hand. The balcony opened into a cool night air, and suddenly Thessaly was stretched out before us. Windows glowing in clusters, streets winding like veins of light. Julia stood beside me, closer than necessary. One hand resting on the railing, the other brushing lightly against the small of my back as she leaned forward. The touch was feather light, barely there. But it grounded me more than the rail itself. Claire appeared behind us not long after, a blanket draped over her arms. "It gets chilly out here," she said with a playful smile. Without asking, she wrapped it around my shoulders, her hands pausing there a moment before smoothing the fabric down my arms. Her fingers pressed warmly into my sleeves, leaving behind a slow trail of heat that had nothing to do with the blanket. I thought that was it, just the three of us in the cool air, but then Emma joined, silent as ever. She leaned against the balcony doorway, arms folded, her figure outlined by the amber glow of the lamp behind her. She didn't come closer right away. She just watched, her eyes moving between Julia Shan at my back, Claire's grip on Miss Holder, and the way I stood caught between them. For a moment, none of us spoke. The city hummed below, faint thorns and distant voices carrying upward. I felt Julia's fingers shift slightly at my back, a small reassuring gesture. Claire pressed her shoulder against mine deliberately, casually as though it was the most natural thing in the world. And Emma, her eyes locked on, her expression unreadable, finally took a step closer. "You look caught," she murmured, voice low. Almost teasing, her words weren't cruel, but they pinned me because she was right. I was caught in Julia's warmth, Claire's energy, Emma's gaze. The three of them, different in every way, surrounding me not like competitors, but like currents off the same tide. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself, but I couldn't stop the way my pulse picked up. Julia Shan shifted higher, resting gently between my shoulder blades. Now Claire leaned her head lightly against my arm, her hair brushing my sleeve. Emma came close enough that I could feel the faintest warmth from her body just at my side. It was the first moment I understood this wasn't about choosing Goni. It was about all three of them choosing to step closer together. When we stepped back inside, the loft seemed warmer than before, as though the night air on the balcony had sharpened every sense. The lights inside glowed low, thinner shades deepened by the shadows in the corners. The city outside was still alive, but muted now, like background music that couldn't compete with the silence settling around us. Claire claimed the couch first, pulling the blanket she draped over me earlier across her lap. She patted the space beside her, smiling up at me in a way that made it impossible not to join her as I sat. The blanket fell across both of us again, our knees brushing under its weight. She didn't shift away this time either. If anything, she leaned in closer, her shoulder pressing into mine. Her warmth undeniable. Julia poured another round of wine, her movements as composed as ever. When she handed me my glass, her fingers lingered in mine longer than necessary. It was just a touch. Skin against skin for a heartbeat too long. But it carried a weight that made me glance up at her. She met my eyes, steady and knowing, before quietly setting her own glass on the table and taking a seat in the chair across from us. Emma had been quiet through it all, but she didn't retreat to her corner this time. Instead, she sat on the other side of me, close enough that her thigh brushed mine. She folded one leg under her, her butt angled toward me, her gaze soft but unrelenting. She didn't try to fill the silence. She just sat there close. Present, her breathing slow enough that I could feel its rhythm beside me. The conversation rested in fragments, small stories, passing questions. Claire laughed easily, tossing her head back, her hand slipping onto mine as if by accident. Though I knew it was and single, quotes tidal circles on the back of my hand, grounding me and quickening me all at once. Julia didn't talk much. She watched, her attention steady and unblinking, every shift of her eyes deliberate. When Claire's hand brushed mine, or when Emma leaned in to speak, I felt Julia's gaze on me, not with jealousy but with something quieter. Acceptance maybe, or curiosity. Emma spoke softly when she did. Her question simple but disarming. "Do you always let people this close?" She asked it at one point, her voice no louder than a whisper. The question wasn't rhetorical. It hung in the air, tugging something from me I hadn't planned to share. It shook my head slightly, answering honestly. Not usually. Her lips curved into Theffantis' smile, and she shifted closer, her shoulder pressing into me now, warm and solid. Between the three of them, I felt pulled in different directions. Claire's easy touch, Julia's watchful gravity, Emma's quiet intensity. Yet it didn't feel scattered. It felt complete, as though each of them held a piece of something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The loft had grown still again. The only sounds were the faint clink of glass, the whisper of fabric when Simeone shifted. And in that stillness, every touch, every glance, carried fluid of something deeper, something unspoken but unmistakable. Time slipped without any of us noticing. The loft had gone quieter, softer, as if night itself was holding its breath. Empty glasses sat forgotten on the table. The blanket had shifted down my legs, though Claire's hand still rested over mine beneath it, fingers loosely twined with my own. Julia hadn't moved from her chair, but her eyes hadn't left me. Emma stayed close on my other side, her thigh against mine, her shoulder pressing gently into me. It should have felt overwhelming, being the focus of three different women. But it didn't. It felt balanced, like the room had settled into its true shape. Julia leaned forward then, resting her elbows on her knees. Her gaze met mine, steady, searching. She didn't speak right away, but when she did, her voice was lower than usual, deliberate. This isn't ordinary." Her words hung in the air, and I felt both Claire and Emma stir beside me. Claire shifted closer, her hand tightening around mine as if to say she wasn't going anywhere. Emma placed her palm gently on my shoulder, her tout grounding, her silence answering Julia before I could. I swallowed, unsure what to say, but Julia's expression softened. "That doesn't mean it's wrong," she added, her voice a quieter now, almost tender. The room felt suspended. Claire leaned her head against my arm, her hair brushing my sleeve. "I don't think any of us are pretending this is anything else," she said lightly. Though her voice carried a seriousness beneath the playfulness, she tilted her face to look up at me, eyes shining in the dim light. "We know what this is." Emma didn't speak, but she didn't have to. Her hand slid from me shoulder down to my forearm, her fingers curling just enough to stay there, warm and sure. When I glanced at her, she met my eyes with that same unwavering calm, her presence saying more than words could. For the first time all night, I let myself stop questioning, stop analyzing. I let the moment be what it was. Three women, different in every way, and yet somehow moving together in the summer rhythm. Julia's steadiness, Claire's spark, Emma's quiet intensity, each drawing me in. Not against one another, but side by side. Julia reached out and, laying her hand over Claire's knee, the simple gesture pulling all of us closer without a single word. The warmth of her touch, the certainty of it, made something inside me settle. I realized it then. This wasn't about choice. It wasn't about dividing myself or favoring Gani over the others. It was about presence, about the fact that all of them were here together, and they were letting me in. I breathed out slowly, a quiet exhale that felt like release. And when I looked up, Julia's lips curved into the faintest smile. Not triumphant, not expectant, just knowing. Claire's hand squeezed mine once, quick and sure. Emma's fingers slid lower, brushing Miris, her touch steady as a promise. The understanding had arrived, not spoken but felt. The night had carried us further than I ever thought it would. By the time the clock pushed past midnight, the loft was steeped in a soft, heavy stillness. The city lights spilled through few windows in quiet rivers, casting pale reflections across the floor. The four of us lingered near the door, but no one moved to end the night. No one wanted to. Julia stood in front of me, her posture poised as always. Though her eyes betrayed something gentler. She reached out first, laying her palm against my chest. The warmth of her hand bowled through my shirt, settling directly over my heartbeat. Her thumb moved slightly, a small, thoughtful stroke as if she were feeling not just the rhythm of my pulse, but the truth of it. Claire stepped closer on my right, sliding her hand down my arm until her fingers found mine. She wove them together with an ease that felt natural, inevitable. Her grip was light at first, testing, then tightened. A playful squeeze that sent acquiescent rush through me. Her energy was still there, bright, lively, but beneath it, I could feel steadiness too. On my left, Emma moved without sound. She rested her head gently against Miss Holder, her hair brushing the side of me face. The weight of her touch was delicate, grounding, her breath warm against my sleeve. She didn't say a word, but the closeness spoke louder than any words could. Together they formed a circle around me. Not enclosing, not trapping, but surrounding in a way that felt protective. Complete. Each touch different, each presence distinct, yet somehow all aligned. Julia's calm certainty. Claire's vibrant spark. Emma's quiet depth. I looked at Julia first. Her eyes met mine with that same steady focus she had held all night. There was no question in her gaze, only clarity. Claire tilted her head upward, smiling softly, her fingers tightening around mine as if to remind me she was still here. Still holding on, Emma's head remained against Miss Holder, her silence speaking more than any promise could. For a moment I didn't move, I just let it wash over me. The weight of Julia's palm against my chest. The heat of Claire's hand and mine. The softness of Emma leaning into me. The world outside faded. Its noise and rush irrelevant. All that mattered was here in the circle who had formed together. None of us said word, but it didn't matter. The understanding was already there. Whatever this was, unconventional, unexpected, extraordinary, it belonged to all of us now. Julia's thumb brushed once more across my chest before pulling her hand back slowly, though her eyes never left mine. Claire squeezed my hand again, this time with a grin that hinted she knew exactly what we had all agreed to without speaking. And Emma, she shifted just enough to glance up at me, her expression soft, certain, a silent acknowledgement that this night was on live beginning. The door stayed closed, the moment stayed whole, and as I stood there surrounded by all three of them, I knew with absolute certainty that I wasn't walking away from them. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? Tell me the setting, the tension, the silence. I'll bring it to life.